My name's Wendy Buckley and I'm the chair of the Sustainable Business Network in North Hampshire and also client director over at Carbon Footprint. This is the recording from the Sustainable Business Network event on biodiversity and your business held on the 30th of July.
Our session today is biodiversity and your business. And it's one that we've been wanting to do really for quite some time. And I think over recent times of the lockdowns, we've really got to appreciate the value of our natural landscapes and all that is for our mental health. I think beyond that as well, if we look towards net zero carbon and all the things we want to do there with climate resilience, we know that we have to live with better balance with our environment and biodiversity, which makes this session very, very pertinent. Hopefully you can all see my slides over there in the box, so we'll just pop over there and have a look at the agenda for today. We're going to start with the usual legal and market updates and then move very swiftly on to a fascinating case study from Dr. Martin Wilkie from Marwell Wildlife and Sophie Sanderson from Kinetic. And finally, to bring this a little bit closer to home for all of your business, delighted to have Debbie Salmon from Birdswood Ecology, who's going to put those things into context for your businesses. We'll start then with the market and legislation updates. We met, some 3 months ago now, and here's a quick pictorial run through of everything that's been going on. And there are lots of things there. We could argue about what should go stage centre there. I'd put the decarbonising transport strategy because that's just come out. But so many things have been going on, really. And I think front and centre is the net zero carbon. So much to do with that, and things that are actually now helping to deliver into that. We'll come into the speed at which that's actually happening, but it's all good stuff. I'm going to land the helicopter now and talk about the Esos Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme, which is something that large businesses within the delegates here will know. Whether you love it or not is another question, but certainly you'll know it. There is a consultation in place for this. So if you go to gov.uk, you'll see exactly what that is. You need to respond by, there we are, the 28th of September there. And there are some touted improvements really to the programme. As you might have recalled there, Esos required you to work out what the energy saving opportunities were, but not actually to do anything about it. So one of the suggestions here is to improve that and actually make you do something to reduce energy. There is also a suggestion of extending that to other businesses aside from the large entities that we already know about. That's worth having a look at. That's always been in the Companies Act and things to be able to do that. And this probably, we could say, aligns a bit better with the streamlined energy and carbon reporting as well. Please do look at that on gov.uk. So a bit of homework there for you to do. I've taken this as a separate page here. This is the government's net zero carbon procurement. This is Procurement Policy Notice 0621, quite an innocuous sounding thing. But what it does mean is that for businesses tendering for government work above £5 million per annum, so fairly reasonable amount really, you'll need to make a net zero carbon commitment, report your carbon emissions, and do target setting to show exactly how you get to net zero. So it's not just enough to say, right, yes, we're going to get net zero, yes, of course we are, and not worry about the detail. The government now wants you, or government procurement wants you to detail exactly how you get there year on year. The additional thing with this is the public disclosure. And this is the first time we're really seeing this. Esos hasn't really gone there on it, nor has SECR. So this is quite an important step. We have put together a little video. There is a little link there that you can follow up afterwards, explaining what that is. And the government has very handily there put in a template showing exactly what you need to do. For those of you doing streamlined energy and carbon reporting, there'll be no surprises in there. So please do go check that out. In the interest of time then, I'll just briefly mention we do have the UK ETS that's launched beginning of the year and is what replaces the EU ETS, as we might expect post-Brexit. That's what it looks like on screen. There are some more stringent requirements on reporting and fines as well. So if you are a big user of energy, please do check that out and know what you're up against. The Committee on Climate Change produced its latest report, and maybe no surprise that actually we did reduce emissions last year, but also that was generally deemed to be not sustainable for obvious reasons. It wasn't really a typical year. The CCC really came away from this wanting to see more action on the reductions rather than big, bold statements from the government. So really, that's what that's all about. And when we look on at some of the weather patterns more recently, perhaps we would have reported extreme weather in more far-flung nations, but now we see those right on our doorstep here in Europe, which focuses the mind. We always like to talk in terms of what kinds of fines are here. I do realise this is a really busy slide, and I do expect you to do some homework on this one. So I'm just going to pick out the main points within this. A number of organisations are getting fined a lot of money now since uncapping came into place. And what we're seeing here, some really eye-watering fines at the back end of the EU ETS. Also, more recently, we're seeing enforcement notices for Esos Phase 2. Can't believe we're still talking about that. That was, December 2019 when that was supposed to have closed. But still, there appear to be quite a lot of folks that still haven't finished their Esos. So it maybe you were caught out because you didn't know you were in Phase 2, but please don't overlook an enforcement notice you get. The fines for Esos can be £40,000 plus, so not something to overlook at all. I mentioned there the metal recycling company, really because as well as a significantly high fine for them, just shy of £1 million all told, was actually the custodial sentence for one of the directors. This has been promised, obviously, in all the things that the EA wants to do, but that's something away from if you transgress, then you just get fined. Now we're seeing custodial sentences coming through. It staggers me that I'm still reporting the problems and fines with water pollution. And really to pull out of here, the last one, which broke about 10 days ago, with Southern Water getting fined, I think it was £90 million for 17 transgressions. And this is raw sewage going into some quite amazing sites. Actually, one really, I'm not sure if it's looked like a triple SI to me, but sites of, extraordinarily beautiful. Still getting polluted, and it's amazing that anyone has that amount of money, £90 million, to pay for those sorts of things, and it still goes on. I'll let you decide what exactly is going on within the water industry that's permitting that. Quick note on streamlined energy and carbon reporting. Many of you will be reporting for the second time now. Just really the watch out if you are entering that programme for the first time because you now are classified as a large entity. Just check with your financial director. You may not have been in phase 1 because you weren't big enough, but lots of businesses have grown over recent times. Just check that you are in there, and if so, go to our website, check that out, and work out what you need to do. There are fines against that one, so you need to make sure that you are on track for that. A quick note, I think about 3 weeks or so ago, we've all seen allegedly 130,000 items that Amazon have disposed of, which I understand is being followed up by the Environment Secretary. Not what we expect from those guys at all. So it will be interesting to see how that actually plans out, and we'll report on that on the next time. Right to repair, we're promised by the government that original equipment manufacturers will need to provide a means for spare parts to be available for equipment so we can all fix our stuff rather than binning it. So that's a very positive step there. Okay, other things happening with regard to net zero, lots of momentum behind that. We've got the World Green Building Council and commitments there. That's all looking good. The G7 met and committed to 1.5 degrees as the maximum there that is allowed. So that's all positive steps. To kind of bring it down a bit more at grassroots level, Grant Shapps then produced the decarbonising transport policy and strategy, and that's on the right there. You can pull that from the gov.uk website. And that, for me, some of the big things in there include the commercial vehicles. We all know about domestic cars and when they all need to be EVs. So nothing but all new cars from 2030 need to be full EVs, no hybrids, no plug-in hybrids, blah, blah, blah. The timelines for commercial vehicles are a little bit longer. So for the lighter commercial vehicles, that's 2035, moving out to 2040 for the larger HGV type vehicles. And in the decarbonising transport strategy, they're very keen to show off some of the pictures of the types of tech you'd see for that, some of the new trucks, which is great. Mentioned the pandemic only briefly for the green recovery dimensions of that. We had some lovely statements from Nissan and from Vauxhall about EV buildings, which is great, as well as great for the environment. It's fantastic for jobs and skills. And also there's a planning application in the Midlands for a gigafactory for battery production, which I think is a really good positive. And COP26 registration's opened as well, so it's all good. Briefly on the environmental bill, this is the watchdog, or as it's officially known, the Office for Environmental Protection has opened. This is their website. If you just type that into Google, you will find it there. And this is going to be fully operational when the environmental bill has reached royal assent, and that's due in the autumn. So this is who's going to be watching over what we do, make sure that we stick to all our environmental policies and goals. Some brief links there. As I say, this is a whistle-stop tour through what's been going on over recent months. Do please follow up on these links. Those are all the background that you need really for that. And that really brings us to the end of what I wanted to say on the legislation there. Just looking at the time, actually, I think we're a little bit close, unless Miles is something we needed to have a look at. I think we need really to move forward on the timing for that. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Martin Wilkie and Sophie from Dr. Martin Wilkie from Marwell Wildlife and Sophie Sanderson from Kinetic for their Ilmore Marsh case study. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Thank you. Yes, it's a great pleasure to be here and to give an overview of our project and how our partnership development has happened over the years. So my name is Martin Wilkie. I'm one of the conservation biologists at Marwell Wildlife. I'm here with Sophie Sanderson, the environment advisor for Kinetic, and we're going to go through the Ilmore Marsh project and how the long-term sort of nature conservation partnership has developed over the last 20 years and more. A little bit about the site and some details around how the project formed, a little bit of positive history, and how the so we'll just give a little bit of an overview of the project, how it's we're working towards a semi-rewilded system, and the complementary benefits we have from our management and things on site. We'll talk a little bit about the ecological environmental significance, and then finally I'll also pass over then to Sophie, who can talk through the partnership development and in particular where the real connections between Marwell and Kinetic are. So yes, just to give you a little bit of background about the site. So Ilmore Marsh, the site itself. So Ilmore Marsh is a triple SI, site of special scientific interest in northeast Hampshire. So we're just to the southwest of Farnborough, right next to Farnborough Airfield. It's a 79-hectare site, which is, as I said, a triple SI. It also has areas to the northeast which are sites of importance for nature conservation. It's surrounded by a complex landscape. We have military areas to our southwest, as I said, the Farnborough Airport to the southeast, and Cody Technology Park to the north of us. So we sit within the perimeter of Cody Technology Park at Kinetic, and we've been working with Kinetic now for more than 20 years, as I said. It's a rich, complex site of habitat mosaics. So we have secondary woodland on site, we have wet and humid heathland, acid grassland, wet grassland, as well as bog and mire habitats as well. So it's quite a diverse site within that small pocket of 79 hectares. Just to give you a little bit of brief history of the site. So we've got records back to Christopher Saxton's maps in 1575, and right in the centre of the map there, we can see the area of Cove, which was Cove Common was the area which Ilmore is now a remnant of. So we can see as we move through the years into 1845, the development of the Basingstoke Canal, and we're beginning to see settlements form around the area. But we still have quite a large area of wet mire habitat in these areas. This is the phase at which Victorian naturalists were beginning to travel down from London and begin to record, and we get our earliest records from this sort of period. So we know it's been a rich and diverse system since those times. As we move into 1873, we can see that we're starting to get more sparsely populated areas, but also the secondary woodlands starting to creep in, and it's starting to become more intensively managed for agriculture in the surrounding area. And as we move into the early 1900s, that's when we really start to see a more formal management of the site, development of the site, I should say. So the Army Balloon Factory was developed around the Farnborough Airport site in around 1904 to 1906. The 1910 was when the Royal Aircraft Establishment was formed, and then moving, and our site was part of that wider landscape complex. And as we moved into the 60s and 70s, the site was a peripheral to the Farnborough Airfield site, and was used for things like fire practice. So we do have a legacy of those sorts of things going on from that sort of time period as well. It wasn't until the 1970s that the Royal Aircraft Establishment, which was the predecessor to Kinetic, formed a conservation group, and they began to realise the importance of Ilmore Marsh. It's the group which we're greatly appreciative of that time. Was they began to recognise very specialist plant communities, particularly in the ditches and those ditch networks and the wetland habitats. And in 1978, they were able to formally get the site designated as a site of special scientific interest. We then went on to in the late 90s to apply for the site of importance for nature conservation designation through Rushmore Borough Council, and also a special protection area in 2005 for Dartford warbler, for woodlark and nightjar as well. So as part of the Thames Basin Heath SPA. So we're able to we've gone through a progressive number of designations and strengthened that protection on our site. So just to talk a little bit about the system, as I said, a semi-rewilded system, semi being the operative word. We have the site is managed as a heathland system, but we do allow the site to naturally regenerate and rewild in areas as well. So that obviously has great environmental importance and benefits, but also for the wildlife, we're seeing allowing some natural processes to begin to form. We're seeing great benefits from that, complemented by mechanical management and also grazing, which I'll touch on a little bit in a little while. So we've seen acid grassland and heathland mosaics form up on the north part of the site, as well as in the southern part of the site near Farnborough Airfield, wetter grasslands with more scrub formation, which is all hugely beneficial, having that diversity in a very small area. So as I say, we're very fortunate to have inherited that. In 2015, we celebrated 20 years of grazing management on site, and Kinetic, the site owners, who we've worked with since 2001, have allowed us to graze the Przewalski's horses on site. So Marwell Wildlife, our zoo collection down at Marwell Zoo, allows us to we needed somewhere to house our surplus male Przewalski's horses. So these horses are a wild ancestor of the domestic horse. They differ genetically from the domestic horse, and they are only within a European protected species program managed by a stud bookkeeper in Prague Zoo. So these species are very hardy species. These went extinct in 1969 in the wild, and now only a part of captive collections or semi captive collections like ours. So all across Europe, we are part of a population of around about 3,500 animals, but for us, they form a hugely important nature conservation grazing element for the site. They are complemented with our Highland cattle on site, who graze the site in a very different way, and as I said, complement the grazing and browsing of the horses. And they're a hugely important part of maintaining and managing the site, enhancing those habitats, building that resilience across the site as they free range naturally across that 200-acre site. As I said, we deliberately have selected the hardy species of the Przewalski's and the Highlands because we allow them to free range year round. This allows them to form those natural foraging activities, as well as develop and, for us, enhance those natural ecological processes. So those are really beneficial for the site, as well as for these grazers themselves as well. And what some of those benefits which we've seen over the last 20 years or so is things like the colonization of new species and existing ones expanding. Things like this is one of our insectivorous plants. This is the roundleaf sundew, which is a plant which similar to a Venus flytrap type thing. I'm sure you guys are very aware of this species, but it's an important one because it's a really good indicator of quality habitat. It appears in these sort of poached areas where the animals have been, disturbed habitat, and it's a really important indicator of what we're doing. We're also starting to see benefits from our grazers on site in terms of the soil arthropods as well, the soil invertebrates. We don't worm our animals on site. We monitor their parasite load very, very closely through fecal sampling. And what that does is it means we have a very high diversity of soil invertebrates and dung invertebrates. And we also have a really broad community of those species as well. So it's another important part of the way we manage the site and the way the habitats develop over time. Just before I move on to some further sort of ecological and environmental significance, I just wanted to highlight a couple of examples of really specifically how the grazing in particular has benefited the biodiversity on site. So this is a food chain example of, on the left there, the ruby-tailed wasp, which is a red data book species. This is a species that is only known in a handful of sites in the sort of northeast Hampshire region. And it's a highly protected species. Now, this species is a parasitic one which lays its eggs in the nest chamber of the potter wasp up in the top right hand corner. The potter wasp then predates on the leaf beetle down in the bottom right hand corner, and the leaf beetle relies on very young sucklers of willow and poplars. So if we didn't have the browsing on site through the horses and the cattle, then this food chain it wouldn't exist. We need that promotion of those food chains and feeding through. And just finally, just to kind of reiterate really how the grazing and the ecological function has benefited. So we have a highly stabilizing effect, it diversifies the plant community, and it also mediates that structure and cover. We're finding that having our animals on site grazing throughout the year at a low stocking density is having benefits for restoring those ecological processes, the competition, colonization, nutrient cycling, and what have you. So we're really seeing those benefits come through. To complement that, we undertake a series of intensive habitat management, which is hence why I refer to it as a semi-rewilded approach. We do have interventions and prescriptions on site to manage things like some of the invasive species or the dominant species, I should say. So purple moorgrass, Millenia caerulea, is sometimes quite dominating on the wet grassland. We deal with a lot of the scrub on site to try and maintain those important open heathland habitats, which is an important part of maintaining our condition, our favourable condition status, which I'll talk about briefly. And we also use some quite heavy-handed approaches sometimes. Heavy-handed is the wrong word, but we use some quite big approaches using diggers to scrape away the surface material, reduce the nutrient load, and the site is hugely resilient, and we end up with a lot of new species colonizing just out of the seed bank alone. So it just needs that helping hand, complemented by the grazing. To touch on the sort of ecological and environmental significance of the site and how the partnership between Kinetic and Marwell has helped that expand. We are beginning and have in the past developed a connected and diverse ecosystem. So we're working much more closely now with with other landowners, with the MOD and the Hampshire Wildlife Trust in the region, as well as through Rushmore Borough Council. So Ilmore is one of 5 SSSIs within Rushmore, and so we're a significant part of that. But we're working with other landowners as well, so with neighbouring Farnborough Airfield to Airport to try and make sure our landscape is connected and diverse and developing that resilience. We've got a complex mosaic of those habitats which I mentioned before, and that really helps maximise the diversity of the site and also build that resilience within at a community level, particularly for invertebrates and plants, but more widely as well. And talking about that, those sort of functional traits, we've done a lot of research to try and understand what's going on in terms of the functional trait benefits of having grazing on site, for example, and looking at how different species of beetles and different plant species are maximised through having this rich composition on site. So just again, very briefly, just to touch on for our 79 hectare site, we are now at over 400 species of conservation concern, including 11 species of orchids, 6 specialist bog plants. There we also have 492 vascular plants, nearly all the reptile species on site, 2/3 amphibians, butterflies, dragonflies, and those 3 European protected bird species I mentioned earlier as well. So as I said, for the size of the site, we're a real hotspot. We the partnership has allowed Marwell to commission contracted specialists to come in and monitor key taxa. So we monitor key vascular plants on site, which allow us to start to understand the natural succession of the habitats, and as well as specific colonization and expansion of species. We look at other communities, including butterflies, which help us to understand those subtle environmental changes and really, again, inform our planning and management going forward. And the same with the dragonflies. Being a wetland site, we have a number of species on site. So this is the small red damselfly, which is we are a stronghold for outside of the New Forest. It's an important species and an indicator of good quality, high quality wetland habitat, and we're pleased that we're seeing stable numbers of those on site as well. I should also mention the sort of research that we carry out on site. So the previous slides around formal monitoring, but this is more about the systematic research we carry out on site. And over the years, we've looked at specific things around grazing intensity, grazing pressure, and trying to anticipate change under different grazing pressures, so working at Ilmore but also on other sites as well, for example Hampshire Wildlife Trust sites. We've looked at landscape connectivity and again resilience, and trying to understand where what role we play in that in a wider system. And we're starting to move into more understanding the ecosystem services benefits that the site and more widely understand more widely what those sites assist us with. One final thing before I pass over to Sophie to talk more about the partnership development is our sand lizard reintroductions. So Marwa has been involved for the last 25 years in breeding. This is Britain's rarest lizard, the sand lizard. In continental Europe, it's a widespread species, but this is a species that is now right on the fringe in England. So we've been working with the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust for a number of years, trying to understand particularly the post-release monitoring. And Ilmore has offered us an opportunity, being the secure nature of the site and working so closely with Kinetic, who have supported us through this, to able to use the site as an experimental research study site to really look at this cryptic species, which we don't know much about, and try and understand when we do these planned reintroductions into these heathland sites, what real benefit this species is having, looking at its dispersal, looking at its fundamental ecology. And so we're really working on that over the coming years to try and understand, and Ilmore's been a great support for that. So just finally then, before I hand over to Sophie, the site is exceptionally diverse wetland system, and we're really pleased that we're being able to report those reinstatement of those critical ecological processes. There's a key recovery of wildlife communities, which is part of our fundamental remit, not only for Natural England, which, I should mention that in 2013 we became favourable condition status for all 3 units across the SSSI, and we've been able to maintain those, building that's important resilience, not only for our site but more widely as well, and also building that broader conservation impact for the future as well. So yeah, the partnership has really helped establish a really positive conservation impact. I'll hand over to Sophie. Hopefully she'll be able to come in, and I will and I'll leave you with Sophie. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Sophie Sanderson. I'm the Environment Advisor for the England sites at Kinetic. So I've just come on to just give a brief overview as to what Kinetic does, and how we have a sort of developed partnership with Marwell and how that's begun. So Kinetic is a global company, and we do a lot of research and development in the defence and security sector. We also have a number of land, sea and air ranges across the UK. As you can see from the top left-hand infographic, we've got a number of sites all across the world, but mostly in the UK. Kinetic manage on behalf of the MOD a variety of different sites, but we also have Kinetic-owned sites as well. We have a number of different sites that have various designations on them. For example, in Scotland, we have the island of St Kilda, which is a World Heritage Site. And then right down at the very bottom, we have MOD Portland Bill, which we manage on the MOD's behalf, which also has status and SAC status. Kinetic, as you can see on the slide, was formed in July 2001 when the MOD split its Defence Evaluation and Research Agency into 2. And one part became what's known as DERA, and the other part was split into what is now DSTL. Kinetic, which was previously DERA, has been at Cody Tech Park in Farnborough since about the late 70s. And we currently have approximately 80 occupiers on site. So it is a Kinetic owned site, but we have a number of different tenants and companies that are on the site as well. Pre-COVID, we were having approximately 2,000 to 2,500 people on site per day. But obviously since COVID, things have changed quite a bit now, but we're still seeing around 1,000 people a day on site. As you can see, we cover a number of different sectors from that bottom infographic. So a lot of test and evaluation, a lot of research and development in the defence and security sector. So not specifically an environmental company as such, but we incorporate the environment into a lot of what we do. So just moving on to the next slide, please. As Martin has already discussed, there was a need for collaboration and management between what was DERA before it became Kinetic. And as Martin mentioned, our relationship with Marwell was formed in 1995 because obviously the site was starting to become of significant scientific importance. And so that relationship was formed. Kinetic as a whole company, especially in the UK, are ISO 14001 certified, which we were successfully recertified in May of this year. We are also 50001 certified as well. And Cody Tech Park in Farnborough, being our HQ site, plays a very important part in this from a 14001 perspective, and the SSSI and the updates and the work that we do with Marwell is really included in a lot of things that go into our 14001 audits, such as site management meetings, site environmental assessments, weekly news site updates from the head of site. So there's a lot of visibility from everyone on site to see what is going on and the work that Marwell is doing. And on top of that, all of our site employees and tenants have access to walk around the SSSI and to understand how it works, and just to be able to use it for things like lunchtime exercise, and as Wendy mentioned at the start of the presentation about using the environment, taking lunchtime walks, getting some fresh air, getting away from your desk, etc. So from that point of view, we're very lucky at Farnborough to have access to that, and it's definitely something that employees and people on site feel very proudly about. And I know that there's certain people who walk it every single day. They know it inside out, and yeah, they're very knowledgeable, which is really nice because they're not necessarily from an environmental background, but they take a really keen interest and they're really proud to have it on their site. So just moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight a little bit more about the things that we do in terms of with the people that we have on site. So as you can see from that bottom picture, myself and Martin gave a guided walk to some of the graduates who have just started earlier on in this year. And pre-COVID, we were doing a lot of lunchtime walks, volunteer days, etc. There was volunteers that came to help with the sand lizard reintroduction as well. So we try and integrate with as many people on site as possible, and we're constantly trying to engage with our staff and tenants as well. As you can see from the bottom left-hand picture, we've got a number of different walking routes throughout the site, and a number of different tracks which employees are able to walk around at their leisure. Obviously, because of the wild animals on site, there are certain gates and cattle grids, etc. So we just ask that people keep the gate shut, and they sort of are sensible and they don't deviate off the path too much, because there are some boggy areas on site. and most of the time we don't have any issues, which is great. We very, very rarely someone will accidentally leave a gate open, and we have had one escape artist at one point, but that was all managed very well, and we've got processes in place if anything like that does happen. So we've got clear processes, and the head site for Kinetic and Marwell, they have clear ideas of who does what in those kind of situations. So everybody's on the right path. And yeah, as I say, Kinetic, we have a number of different sites across the UK, including other sites that have designations on. Some of them are very big, such as MOD Shoebury-Ness in Essex, but we also have some other very small sites which have designations, and we as a company really like to be able to collaborate with conservation societies, RSPB, wildlife trusts, etc. And so we really try hard to form those partnerships and relationships. And it was only yesterday that Martin was giving a tour around Gilmore to the British Dragonfly Conservation and Group, who I believe had a very great time. So
And Debbie will put into context. I think it's Debbie. Can we hear you there? We can see you.
Me, yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can. So I'm hoping that was absolutely fascinating from Martin and Sophie. It's really over to you. I think we've got about 15 minutes or so to take everything we've seen for that magnificent exemplar there and perhaps bring things a little bit down to earth for those of us that perhaps don't have 200 acres of triple SI to biodiversity on. Debbie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It also extends the roof life because you haven't got your roof exposed to sunlight. So you do have a waterproof surface and then a green roof, but the waterproof surface is protects the rest of the roof, basically. It also provides noise insulation, so you will have less noise from the outside because you've got a green roof. And I think most importantly, in a way, it provides a green area, very like Eelmore Marshes for their employees. It will provide a green area for your employers to appreciate and use in their lunch times and their break times. You can put seating areas up, you can put paths in it, you can make it into a really nice place for your employers. Next slide, please. Right, so you remember I told you about ecological corridors and the fact that we needed to provide connected corridors between our green spaces and between the countryside. Now, business can really help with this. And the reason is that a lot of business is either in town centres or in industrial estates, in areas where there's very, very little green. Ecological corridors can be created really, really easily. So you can take up some of your hard standing and put down a wildlife verge. You can plant trees, a colonnade of trees, and then you're providing a corridor for flying species. It is quite easy. If you haven't got any land or very little land on your own, if you're in a business estate, if you're in a town centre and you're a shop, talk to your neighbours, see what you can do together, see if you can create a connected network all the way through your site together. Another way that you can provide a corridor is to provide a network of hedgerows. So you may decide that you're just going to have a network of hedgerows with perhaps a little verge, and you're going to cover your industrial estate or outside your businesses with just a little indigenous hedgerow. That's absolutely fantastic for many, many ground dwelling species. If you've got existing habitat, then you can seed it, you can take it back to its subsoil and you can seed it. Wildflowers always do better on poor soil, so take your rich soil off the top if you can. So they can be seeded, and then you can create new habitats. So you may decide, rather than having a wildflower rich habitat, you might decide that you want to create acid grassland through your site because you happen to have an acid soil. And that's, I know what Quintec is thinking about. They've got a lot of acid soil, so they're thinking that maybe they might make their verges, rather than having non-indigenous scrub on it, they may actually go back to acid grassland, which will be absolutely amazing for any species that migrating out of Eelmore Marsh and any species that may be in the Rushmore Borough site, the other end of the corridor. On smaller sites, as I said, try and work with neighbours. If you can't provide a corridor, create nectar bars. Nectar bars are flower-rich habitats for invertebrates, so they can skip from one nectar bar to another. So you can do that just by putting a planter outside your building. A nice trough full of wildflower or full of species that are within the local environment, and you will have a stepping stone, a nectar bar, a stepping stone for all your invertebrates, and then you will start seeing birds within your area. Next slide.
Okay, just a couple more minutes, please,
Oh,
Betty, if
okay.
you could. Thank you.
Okay, benefits to wildlife is that they link urban green space, they connect the countryside, they provide habitat for ground dwelling fauna, including invertebrates, amphibians and reptiles, provide a food source for flying invertebrates and birds, and they enable rare species to mix and breed, increasing the gene pool and resilience to existence. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Many British amphibians are also in real decline. So almost all our amphibians are in decline. Great crested newts are very rare. Common toad and frog is now really struggling. And they're thought to be, the decline's thought to be due to disease, but also because they've lost a lot of their pond habitat and connecting terrestrial habitat. And because they've become fragmented, their gene pool is now becoming very limited, and they're becoming very vulnerable to local extinction. Next slide, please. So by digging a pond or digging a collection of very small ponds, which is what amphibians prefer, you can provide them with important feeding and breeding areas. Ponds are just going to be so important in the future for aquatic species. Water troughs. I haven't got a pond in my garden, but I've got lots and lots of water troughs. I have lots of toads and frogs in my garden. They don't breed in my garden, but they can stop off there on their migration, and they also overwinter in my garden. So they are really important stepping stones. Amphibians must stay moist, and therefore if we provide them with water, then they can get to where they need to go to breed. Your other species might use your pond as well, such as the grass snake. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, mine hasn't gone on.
We can see nesting, roosting and feeding.
Oh, there we are. Nesting, roosting, feeding and shelter. So say you're on a smaller site. At the moment, we've looked at the big picture, but ponds are great on smaller sites, but also you can provide a number of enhancements. So you can provide a log pile, just a pile of logs. That's all you need with a little bit of grass, and you will get invertebrates in, and you will also get our amphibians and reptiles. We'll use them for hibernation. So providing you've got some connection, they will come in, and they can get down quite wide areas that haven't got any vegetation. You can have a loggery, which is the first picture, which is just logs sunk into the ground. Stag beetles in particular love them, and in the southeast we are a hotspot for stag beetles, which are very rare elsewhere. As I said, you can have hedgerows. You can just have a patch of brambles and nettles. Then you will get in certain butterflies that like that food plant. So you can have nesting boxes for declining species such as swifts, house sparrows, house martins, starlings, but don't forget the common ones, they're struggling too. So you can have finch boxes, you can have robin boxes, there's all kinds of boxes out there, and you can decide what you want. You can have bee boxes, which is the last picture. You just need a wall, that's it, and you'll get mining bees in, and they colonise really quickly. You can have bat boxes, don't need any habitat for bat boxes. Providing you put up 2 or 3 bat boxes, you will start getting pipistrelles at least in. And as I said, you can have nectar bars and other feeding areas. Next slide, please. And just if you can't do anything on your site, or even if you can, there's also stuff you can do off-site. So you can sponsor a wildlife conservation group. There's lots of them out there. They always struggle for money. They do wonderful jobs. I know in Rushmore, which is where I worked up to a few months ago, we've got one group that is managing a 30-hectare ancient woodland. We've got another group that is managing a whole river system. They do it on an absolute pittance. They get no funding. So if you can fund them, they will be eternally grateful. You can arrange for your employees to attend a work party as a team building day. Again, go to Wildlife Trust, Carbon Footprint do them, Wendy's organisation. Any local authority would be glad to have a work party on their sites. I'm sure Kinetic does them as well. So have a look for doing a day, or maybe a regular day that your employees take off to do some conservation work. Fund a project to create habitat and offset your carbon footprint. Trees are great, and a lot of tree funding has been promoted by the government. Don't forget the other habitats. If you're not in a habitat for trees, go for, I said grassland, go for heathland, go for wetland. Wetland is a much better carbon capture than trees are. So, or you can fund a school project to educate the next generation. And again, lots of local authorities would be able to point you in the right direction. Approach a local school, see if they want to do an outdoor project, especially in the COVID times. Next slide, please. And that's me done.
Debbie, thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant, and how great to see things brought right down to the really practical level there. I've been scribbling lots of things down here, things that I want to do. That's great. I can see, I know we're running just a few minutes late, but I think it's so fascinating. We've let that just run a little bit there. There are a couple of questions. I'm actually going to take them in reverse order. We've got one question here about the what do I do really if I've got a solar PV on my roof and trying to integrate a green roof with in that type of scenario. Debbie, I'm going to go to you for that, please.
Okay, yeah, solar PV, it's a shame I almost put a picture in of that. Solar PV can be used with green roofs, okay? So you can have half your green roof and half solar panels. Solar works exceptionally well with green roofs, or you can set them into your green roof. So that is no problem. Just make sure that your vegetation is not too high and so shading them.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Let me look down here. There was one from earlier, actually, which kind of connects some of these elements together, asking about if there is an ISO standard for net zero. This is going to be sort of a little bit of a ramble explanation. There are a few things in here. Net zero carbon is a relatively new term that's gained so much momentum. What we do have are a few things. Going way back when, we actually do have the BSI's publicly available specification 2060, also known as carbon neutrality, okay, which was from way back when. But casting our way back to the public procurement note that we talked about, PPN 0621 on net zero procurement, this actually does refer to the PAS 2060, okay, on carbon neutrality. I think there is a little line there, certainly if you go to the video related to the net zero procurement, you'll see that within that. So that's one side of the equation. The other is that lots of commitments are being made now to something called science-based targets, SBTs, and what we are doing a lot of is target setting for our clients at the moment, which is charting that course. And actually we did a topic on this actually on the last SBN, so you might want to just log into that and have a look of how you set your targets up. Whether you actually want to go the full hog and get it registered with science-based targets is up to you, but the important thing and what the government wants you to do is to have a target and have a means of getting there. So in short, no ISO standard I'm aware of per se. There is the PAS 2060 from the BSI that seems to have been dusted down a little bit by the government's PPN 0621. In the meantime, you need target setting, and you might want to consider science-based targets. That's really that's really what I would say about that. Miles, are you spotting anything else on there that's in the dying seconds of this session here?
We have one more question. I presume this one's for Debbie. It's, do ponds need much maintenance, i.e. would the algae need to be removed for the newts?
They need a certain amount of maintenance. They do need, ponds will eventually fill in. It takes them about 10 to 15 years to fill in. So a little bit of dredging every 10 years it will be required. Other than that, as long as you get your ecosystem right, then you shouldn't have algae. Okay, so amphibians like it sort of 2/3 covered, 1/3 free, so 1/3 open water. Providing you get enough oxygenating plants in there, you should be fine. If you've got a problem with algae, you can always put some wheat straw in there, and that usually resolves it. But algae is basically the sign of an unhealthy pond. If you are struggling with your pond, you can always get an ecologist in to come and advise you. Okay, But I would try wheat straw first before you do anything else. Make sure that your planting reflects any water bodies around you, and you should be all right, but be patient, because it will algify at the start and then it should clear. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you, Debbie. And I actually got one question that was actually emailed across. This is for Sophie from Kinetic. Just talking about there, you mentioned that you have ISO 14001. Are you able to use the activities that you're doing on your sites there as metrics within your 14001, or would you advise someone to include that as one of the actions they do there within their 14001?
Yeah, I definitely include it in one of the actions that you do. And at Farnborough, we sort of use Ilmore Marsh as like a local site environmental target as well. So we're able to tie in what we're doing on site into our environmental management of the whole site as well, because obviously the Triplet site is part of the whole site. And so it comes into our site environmental assessment. It's included in that and the activities that we do on that. So yeah, it is all linked. We don't take any sort of specific metric data as such that I'm aware of, but like I mentioned, we do use it quite a lot, and auditors are always very interested when we talk about that and how we integrate. And we have had Marwell come on to audits, especially recently where they've been remote as well. So we've had Marwell sit in on the remote audits, and they've talked about what they're doing on site as well. So yeah, it's definitely part of our 14001.
Great, and if I can add into that, by inference, for perhaps some smaller scale projects that Debbie's talked about, actually including those as well within other businesses, 14001 assessments might be useful, because I think, you know, Sophie, you probably recognise this, as you go forward with your 14001, it becomes sometimes a little bit difficult when you've tackled you know, the obvious internal things to see what you can do more. And obviously there's vast amounts you can do within your community that is more there.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. There's always something that you can be doing, I think, even if it is on a very, very small scale.
Great. Okay, I think we're going to have to bring the session to a close just in a minute. Hopefully you can see my screens. I'm just showing that QR code again there. That is the feedback from the session. So again, if you can get your phones out, please, and give us some response on that, that would be absolutely great. I would like to thank our presenters, Martin, Sophie and Debbie once more this morning, and also to mention that these sessions couldn't take place without the kind support of Basingstoke and Dean, Rushmore and Hart Council. So thank you to them for supporting these sessions. So we hope you have a lovely weekend and can take away some of the actions, be they large or small, to help to enhance the local environment, the communities and the experience of your employees in your business.
We'd love to hear from you with ideas for future events, and also if you'd like to present at these events. So please do get in contact with us.